So this is the week where like Israel's in full-blown assault on Rafah. And so any discussion, it is May 28th now, but any discussion of red lines, if they do this, the weapon sells that, no, it's been going on. That's a foregone discussion. That is an irrelevant and hypothetical discussion because Rafah is being attacked, including safe zones. And I know you know this, Blakely, but Sunday night, Israeli missiles struck a tent encampment full of displaced families, which immediately set it on fire. 45 people were killed, 250 were injured. And mind you, this was just 2 days after the ICJ, International Court of Justice, was saying Israel needs to stop the assault on Rafah to avoid genocide. Even just since this attack, there's been 60 missile strikes on Rafah and another tent massacre that just today happened that killed 21 people. But I want to sort of read. Look, I don't show video lightly. I usually never show video. I don't even usually share video on my social media, but I'm going to share a video from Sky News because somehow Sky News is doing the work, but also share this eyewitness account from Middle East Eye. They said, this is from Mohammed Abu Seba, who said, I came out of my tent and saw fire everywhere. A young girl was screaming. We helped her and her adult brother. When we returned, the encampment was totally destroyed. It took around 11 fire trucks between 1 and 2 hours to finally stop the fire, according to Al Fayoum. I think that was someone else who's quoted earlier. The teenager said her family were planning, that's Fayoum, were planning to relocate to another camp on Monday morning as the Israeli attacks in Rafah had increased in recent weeks, but they've lost their money in the fire, meaning they can't go anywhere now and have no tent to shelter in. I mean, I don't know about you, Blakely, but the idea that like money is still a thing for people, and we know that because of the massive amounts of GoFundMes and people trying to leave, but I'm just like, so if you survived, your money is now gone, and so you can't pay for food if there is any, but to go anywhere, to like get travel or get a new tent. It's just wild. Yeah. Let me play this video and then we'll talk if we're not sobbing in a little ball. This is from Sky News, and this is a man who he had a 14-year-old daughter who was killed. And look, guys, there's been accounts and there are video of a baby whose head was blown off by the impact of the missile. This is a 14-year-old. Same thing happened to her. There isn't, obviously the footage isn't graphic, it's blurred, but just take a look.
Aya was 14 years old. She was decapitated in the explosion. What remains is wrapped in the blue shopping bag. Her father can barely bring himself to look. That's her there, he says, torn into pieces.
So if you're listening, he opens a bag. It's a little plastic bag, twice wrapped, and he opens it, and then the cameras blur, and you realize that's her head, that's her hair, that's her face. Like, are we like, what planet are we on? Like, we cannot imagine what these folks are going through, and I cannot imagine the barbarism, the pieces of shit who would do this to anyone. But there you have it, Blakely. I mean, that is what, like, if this doesn't radicalize you, if this doesn't wake you up, fucking what will?
Yeah, I honestly ask myself that sometimes, because this whole thing has totally changed me. It didn't just change my opinion on Israel-Palestine. It's changed me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel the same than before this happened. It's changed my politics too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking more at whether or not people think this is acceptable or whether they don't, rather than if they're Democrats or Republicans.
Oh, 100%.
To watch this day after day and to see this, it's hard to not know where to put the rage and the anger, and to feel so helpless to try to stop it, to feel like we have no voice in our so-called democracy, that this continues to happen, that these people are allowed to continue to carry out these atrocities in our name with our tax dollars and no consequences. And we all have to keep collectively pretending that the IOF is just the most incompetent army that's ever been, and they don't know how to do precision strikes and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And that it was just, it was an accident. It was an accident. I am so tired of their gaslighting. And it just, I feel like I want to do something and I don't know what to do. Yeah. Because it feels to me, this has been a reminder that we do not control our own country. We don't control our own government, because if we did, this would have stopped.
Yes.
And the other reminder that our entire facade of international law, kind of what you were talking about earlier, is a joke. And I'm glad we can dispense with that. That we've always pretended that we really care about international law in the UN. I'm glad they've revealed to us that we don't. If they don't. And the other thing that I think of when I see this kind of stuff is, understandably, those who are left, because I know they think they're going to eradicate Hamas, but they're not going to. Those who are left are going to understandably despise those who did this to them. And if anybody thinks that there is not going to be consequences to that, you're delusional.
Yeah. I mean, the blowback will happen. The blowback could happen on Americans.
Yeah.
But I also think that it is anyone internationally watching, and this happened during the Iraq War as well. We all took the streets, and whether it's polls, whether it's calls, whether it's taking the streets, everyone knew the world over that we were going to war over the opinions of voters and the American public. It was just clear this was what was going to happen. And the same thing on this. But on that oopsie, that's exactly what Israel said. Top military prosecutor said the attack was grave. Netanyahu said it was a mistake, and now there's an investigation. This is exactly what they said. However, after every single massacre that we've seen in the last 8 months, after the Jabalia massacre, remember the massive crater on the refugee camp, the Al-Shifa hospital massacre, the multiple massacres, obviously the mass graves are I guess that's still under investigation. The flour massacre, when people were trying to get food and get fed, the World Central Kitchen that killed 7 international aid workers and 1 Palestinian. And then now this began being called the tent massacre, which is no longer applicable because 3 days later, there's another tent of displaced families that are attacked. So, but maybe for a little bit of humor, here is what, the spokesperson for the Israeli government, Avi Haiman, says what they're doing and how serious they take this.
We went after 2 Hamas commanders responsible for many attacks in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, but predominantly Judea and Samaria. They were drenched in Israeli blood, these 2 individuals. According to initial reports, a fire broke out after the attack. These terrorists were hiding underground, and it would appear that there were civilian casualties. We're looking into this. That it was definitely grave. Any loss of life, civilian life, is grave, and is awful.
All right, this dude doesn't give a shit about it. So this is what they said. They said they were going after Hamas, 2 Hamas leaders, which we know now that that's their justification. It doesn't matter. You can kill 300 civilians if you get an alleged 2 Hamas militants. But again, this is just a couple weeks after, and Blakely, I'm sure you saw this.
Yes, I did.
This is just a couple, and I'll sort of scrub through this. But this is a week after Avi Haiman was on Piers Morgan, and Piers, I guess, grew a fucking pair and finally pushed back a little bit on this Israeli spokesperson who clearly thought this was going to be a layup and was not. So he asks him, how many civilians have you killed? Because they're like, oh, we've killed 14,000 Hamas fighters. Like, where? Like, what are you even talking about? 14,000 is actually the number of children. That's a low estimate for the number of children who have been killed, and or the number of men over the age of 18. Like, however they're counting it is bullshit. But here, Piers is asking the same dude, how many civilians? Do you count how many civilians have been killed?
We don't have exact figures, as you know. It's the fog of war.
But you've got exact numbers for Hamas terrorists you've killed. Why wouldn't you know how many civilians you've killed?
Because obviously our focus is to go after the Hamas terrorists. And
hang on, I mean, that does imply that you're putting a bigger premium on killing Hamas terrorists in terms of numbers and accountability than you are on innocent civilians. That can't be right, surely. If you know exactly how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, you must know how many civilians you've killed. Otherwise, you're prioritizing the lives of terrorists over innocent people.
I mean, it's a simple point, right? Like, which again, Blakely, what's crazy is the United States is, after this tent massacre, their line is the fucking same, which is, we implore Israel to do everything they can in their power to minimize civilian casualties. It's like, but they don't. They relish in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do not. They don't even keep track of them.
Yeah. But they have all the militants that they have track of. I loved that interview. I thought that interview was hilarious because Piers, but do you condemn Hamas Morgan, did not even realize that he was like grilling this guy. It was like accidental.
Right. Well, let's watch a little bit more because there's a moment that you're like, wait a minute, did it freeze?
Yeah.
Piers, with respect, don't put words into my mouth, please. I didn't say exactly 14,000. I said around 14,000. Whereas Hamas will come out with precise numbers that statisticians
will
look at.
Give me a ballpark number for civilians.
Well, you can use the ballpark as far as the Hamas figures, which I reject as being false.
Wait, I love that he's like, well, I don't have a number, so just use the Hamas number, which is just the Gaza Health Ministry number. But he's like, but they're not real. But we all know you rely on them. The United States rely come up with another number. Just come up with a different number. Just lie into a different number. But they don't care enough about covering their asses to even lie about a fake number. Just say 11,000 instead of 36.
Well, if they're false, why would you give me those?
I gave you the numbers that I had.
No, you told me you know how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, but you don't seem to have any idea how many civilians you've killed. I'm just bemused. Why wouldn't you keep count of both?
I don't have that information to give you, Piers. If I did, I would.
You've literally no idea how many civilians you've been killing.
I can tell you definitively that our aim is to go after Hamas.
No, hang on. I'm sorry to push you on this. That's quite extraordinary. You're an official spokesman for the Israeli government, and you have no idea how many civilians you've killed. I thought you just told me that you were particularly careful about not killing civilians. But if you don't know how many you've killed, how can you say that with any certainty?
Because even if you were to go by a ratio of the Hamas figures, we would still be far ahead of any Western army. That wasn't my question.
You know,
we'd be far ahead of any Western army. Like,
how do you know you're far ahead if you don't know the number?
Far ahead of what? Like, yeah, we do. We've killed far fewer babies than everyone's got their. And here's the thing, Blakely. Yeah, he stops and he literally won't answer. Like he's stonewalling him a little bit later. But if you push them, the answer is always, just like with any unaccountable person in power, it's always so.
Yeah.
And also, what about the American genocide against the natives here?
Yeah.
All right.
Love that one, yeah.
Don't Jews deserve their own to do genocide, or are you anti-Semitic? Like, this is literally the logic, and it's been told to me. It's been told to all of us. Like, oh, so what are you saying? And it's just like, it's whataboutism. And at the end of the day, so what?
Endless whataboutism. And I've had people say that to me all the time. Aside from getting called anti-Semitic every single second of every day, I get aren't you an American?
Yeah.
Was there a genocide? As if that's supposed to be some kind of checkmate. Like, oh, you know what? You're right. There was a genocide in America against Native people. So you know what? My bad. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
On. Do your thing.
Yeah, sorry. No, everyone gets one. See, that's how history works. Everyone gets a genocide.
Yeah. It's not fair. We're such hogs. We're always hogging everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How dare you? But
I also love how he goes, it was a fire broke out. A fire broke out. It just broke out. Everything just happens to happen to kill all these civilians.
Yep.
It wasn't that they dropped a 2,000-pound bomb on it. It was that a fire just broke out. And they got the two militants that they just said were underground. So if they were underground, why were you bombing a tent camp?
Yeah.
You're just fires. It's ridiculous. But it's like you said, They never get held accountable for anything. They never do. So they don't need to care enough to come up with convincing lies.
Exactly. They're just kind of like, what do you want from me? I don't know. You know. Speaking of headlines and how we frame this, New York Times headline is Gazans look through ashes after Israeli strike on Rafah. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so silly. I don't know why we're being flowery with this. Gazans burned alive.
Yeah.
And thank God they actually put Israeli strike on Rafah. That's good.
Yeah,
but
I guess you're right. That's progress. Because before they would just go by airstrike, like it kind of just happened. These are the same people that I'm sure you saw that the Atlantic came out with an article saying sometimes killing kids is legal. You know?
Yes.
You know?
Yes, we are. I mean, it's like I can't believe it this late date. But anyway, Piers has evolved lately.
Yeah, I saw that Piers Morgan is now Hamas.
Tweeting, the scenes from Rafah overnight are horrific. I've defended Israel's right to defend itself after October 7th, but slaughtering so many innocent people as they cower in a refugee camp is indefensible. Stop this now, Netanyahu. To which this person, I am Blakely, said, yeah, but you condemn Hamas, which is so perfect. Like, thank you, massive propagandists, for having a heart on this one instance. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.